Well, good morning, everyone. I'm so glad you were able to join us this morning to talk about digital transformation for CPA firms. Um, my name is Adam Batchelor, and I work at an organization called CPA Crossings, which is a partner of the Indiana CPA Society. And we work together to build um, what I think and I hope is a really informative report for INCPAS members, which is available on the website. As we get through the presentation, you're going to see how to actually download and look at the report, and so you can get the full breadth of information that we put together for you all. We're going to talk an awful lot about what's in it as a sort of a teaser, and hopefully share some of the good information that's there. But just a couple of things right out of the bat I wanted to share with you. First of all, again, thanks for being here. If you have any questions, thoughts, ideas, anything that you want to add into the conversation, I really encourage you to do that. There'll be a couple of parts where I may pause to get some feedback, get some thoughts from you all. If you're not feeling very talkative today on a Friday morning, that's okay. We've got plenty of content to cover, but always try to hear from you all to hear what's really happening in your firms and in your organizations. Also, before we jump in to the presentation, I just want to take a minute and thank all of the members and certainly the organization at INCPAs. I get in my role to work with every state society across the country and a lot of other organizations that serve the profession. And I don't say this to every one of them, but I will say it sincerely to you as members of the Indiana CPA Society. You've got a great organization, and you are incredibly well served by the leaders of that organization. Courtney and Stacy and Nicole and Christina and so many, the whole team there at INCPAs, incredible to work with. They are constantly representing the needs of you all as members. I know across the state, but also across the country, and contributing to the really the progress that the profession gets to make here. Going forward into a time of great change and transformation and potentially some uncertainty, you all are well served in Indiana, and I appreciate the opportunity to partner with you through this. As I mentioned, I work in an organization called CPA Crossings. We serve state CPA societies with education like webinars and on-demand learning and research like what we're about to go through and some other things, trying to help state societies continue to meet the needs of their members. I should also mention that CPA Crossings is a subsidiary of. It is owned by the Pennsylvania Institute of CPAs, and I also work there. So I also serve as the chief operating officer of PICPA. So just as far as introductions for me, that's the work that I get to do. I work at a state society. I know how important members are, and I know how important your time is. So let's jump into some content as we go through here. This report, which again is available on the website for download, I think the links may be on the last slide here, is a little bit different than some of the other research we've done. So along with INCPAs and other state societies, we've studied the pipeline, we've studied retention, we've studied we're about to study compensation and benefits. We've studied the state of the CFO position, all kinds of things. And very often we go out and we survey hundreds or even thousands of practitioners and professionals or students to kind of get a sense for what's happening out there on the ground. We took a different approach for this survey, which I think was really well informed. And instead of asking practitioners and firm leaders what's happening in their firms, we went straight to the experts. And you see five of them on the screen here. These folks all contributed to what you're about to hear. And every day in their professional lives, they're helping firms implement technology or operate with quality. So John Higgins, Jody Paydar, Byron Patrick, Donnie Shimamoto are all consultants directly to firms, helping them implement and become more efficient, proficient, and grow and serve their clients better through technology. So that's the work that those folks do. I'd encourage you to look them up, especially if you're running a firm and you get to the end of this conversation or read the report and think, this really prompted some good questions for me or for my firm. I know that these folks would be happy to help, and you would be well served by engaging them. Allison Henry is more of a technical accounting and auditing expert. You'll see some of her contributions come up when we get to AI. Allison is the Vice President of Professional and Technical Standards and also the Administrator for Peer Review in Pennsylvania. And so she does an awful lot of work on quality and ethics, and that was what she was able to contribute to that important part of this conversation. I should mention the two people who did most of the work to make this report happen are also on the call with us. So if you have specific questions, maybe turning to them. But Kelly Waffle and Dr. Megan Nadson were the researchers who helped put the report together. Here's what we're going to talk about. And what you'll see is the report follows what I think is a really great approach. We first started out with kind of helping firms do some diagnosis, and we'll talk about what that means, sort of where are you today so that you can define where you're going to go tomorrow. So you'll see things like the digital maturity model and the firm tech ecosystem as we walk through this. And then we went out and we said to our engaged consultants, what are the biggest challenges that you see firms dealing with today, and how can firms overcome those challenges? So we'll talk through all 5 of those challenges in some detail and what you can do if your firm is facing them to hopefully drive forward in technology adoption, selection, all the important critical milestones of becoming a more digitally empowered firm. We'll look at some specific models. We will talk a little bit about AI. This is not necessarily an AI presentation, but we'll do some practical discussion of AI. And then, finally, we may get a chance to look at what some firms are doing in the AI space. So here's an opportunity to stop and potentially participate if you're interested. I'd love to hear from you what your firm is doing today. So what are you investing in? What are you implementing? What are the goals the firm has for technology? We'll just pause for a minute before I go over kind of what we've heard from some firms previously. But anybody want to volunteer to kind of contribute? What are your biggest challenges with technology? What are you working on? Where are you headed firm-wise? Usually I am like not beyond calling on people, but I because we've got so much content, I'm okay if you don't want to jump in just now, but really encourage you to ask questions as we keep going through this. I think what our experts kind of coalesced around, and what I see from firms every day also, is small firms grappling with affordability, and some maybe being a little bit trigger shy on engaging new tools because of the fear of the challenges we're going to talk about, but really how all of that adds up to a return on investment. We see from mid-sized firms, multi-partner firms, the amount of technical debt that can inhibit your organization if you end up with botched integrations and bouncing around between a lot of systems and systems not cooperating or communicating with each other as a really big challenge that firms are working through right now. And then obviously, as you get into larger firms, we certainly hear an awful lot about scalability, capacity. How can I make sure that I'm going to empower all of my professionals as I think about making an investment in a tool? This is a quote from the report that I'll maybe spend just a second putting some context around. And every day in my job, I get to speak with firm leaders and hear an awful lot about what they're dealing with as it relates to technology, operations, efficiency, talent, those sorts of things. And a few years ago, I heard from firms an awful lot that the biggest challenge was convincing their partner group to invest in technology. Often, a leader or some leaders really knew and could see that technology was going to be the difference maker, the force multiplier for them, to grow their firm, increase quality, all the elements that are listed in this slide. But I think we've seen an evolution here. And instead of, hesitancy or reluctance to invest, I think most firms are pretty well coalesced around the fact that they've got to continue in a continuous way investing in technology. The bigger holdup for them today is not whether to invest, but where to start or where to go next. I think that's driven a lot by talent shortages and maturity in the technology itself. But more firms than not today are telling me, Adam, we are ready to go. We want to invest, but where should we start? How do we know what's the right place for our organization to start investing or to invest next? And so that's where our insight sort of starts here. And we created 2 models to help in that evaluation process. And then we'll talk in a moment about sort of how to apply it to a practical process. But the first is the digital maturity model, which you can see on the screen right now. There's quite a bit of text on this slide, and so I don't expect you to be able to read all of it. It's obviously published in the report as well. But Really encourage you to do sort of a clear-eyed evaluation, a clear-eyed diagnosis on where your organization is in this maturity model, because it can really influence where you decide to invest. The next slide has a bunch of tool logos on there, software logos that you could think about investing in. But I do think a critical step in this process is saying, just where are we today? Because you can make some real missteps if if you're not careful there. If you are, for example, on the blue purple level one lower maturity model, and you start looking at, for example, super high powered AI enabled audit technology, and your firm is just not ready for that, you are very likely to waste time and money and not realize the results that you're looking for. We ran this survey for the state of Pennsylvania, where we asked firms to self-identify, where are you in this model? And that was in last year in 2023. And we found most firms kind of finding at least self-identifying, self-diagnosing themselves somewhere between 3 and 5, right, in the 4 range. And then we asked them some specific questions like, what are you doing related to cybersecurity? How are you handling document management? How much of your practice is in the cloud versus on premises? And found that perhaps a more objective diagnosis would in fact not have placed them in 4. So really encourage you to be a little bit critical of your firm and your organization when you think about where you are from a maturity level, because sometimes we can be perhaps a little aspirational when we place ourselves here. The other tool that we start the report off with is let's call it a simplified or an incomplete ecosystem of tools that firms can avail themselves of. And what we'll say is, while this comes up early in our report, it should not be the first place that your firm turns when you're thinking about what technology to invest in. This tool is really helpful and useful later in the process when you're thinking about, when you've already identified, where do I want to invest, what's best for my firm, specifically with processes, where do I want my firm to get. Then it's time to turn to tools selection. And when you get there, what we wanted to do is, this is about 50 providers. This is far from all inclusive. But just a couple of the buckets where we see firms investing: assurance, tax, practice management, ops, and client-facing tools, and then CAS, or client advisory, client accounting services tools. There's a lot out there. There are new providers every single day, and so this is just basically, let's call it a Google starting point for that are not necessarily vetted, but these names are provided by our experts as, here's the places that they see firms turning to when they're thinking about automating or investing in assurance tech or tax tech, or whatever the case may be. I will say that there's obviously some of the mega providers on here, and there are some new smaller providers. Obviously, CCH and Thomson Reuters, I'm sure, is on here, and some of those sorts of big providers that in all likelihood your firm is engaged in as a platform from which to operate. Our experts really tend to encourage people. What we hear from firms is, we want to buy the bundle and want to get it all in one place. And what we hear from experts is a little bit contradictory to that. It's, in some cases, you should in fact be shopping for sort of best in breed technology, not necessarily what's connected. What you end up, making the investment in there is integration, which can be difficult for a firm, but often getting a better tool can lead to, I'd say, higher rewards or higher return than just buying whatever is already bolted in or built in to your broader technology platforms. The one place where our experts are kind of advising against that, and you'll see when we get to this point, is in AI, right? So I think in a lot of cases for small and mid-sized firms, the recommendation is sort of let AI come to you through the tools that you're already buying. Most of these tools are going to be implementing that into the tool, right? So rather than going out and buying a bunch of bolt-on AI tools, as the technology matures, let it come to you in the larger platforms that you're already buying. So those are tools that we're going to use as we get into these processes. I'll stop for 1 second in case we have thoughts, questions, ideas. Anybody have something they want to talk about before we jump into these challenges? All right. Very good. Well, thank you all for sticking with us here. Encourage your questions along the way, and feel free to use the chat. Also, I do have that open, and I can see if you drop a question or a thought in there, and I'll make sure I share it with the group. So I mentioned, we started off with, here's a couple of models that you can use as you're going through an evaluation process, a selection process, an implementation process, an ongoing analysis and sort of feedback process. But what we didn't want to do is just give firms something that, frankly, is a firm by firm decision. Those couple of steps in the process often have to be really firm specific. And they have to be so firm specific because firms face a plethora of challenges and opportunities and realities that make the selection and implementation of technology a really individualized and personalized process. So instead, what we do is to say, let's call out and identify some of the bigger and more critical challenges for a firm to overcome. And so you see these on the screen, and here's what we're going to talk through. I mentioned where to begin. This one could equally be called sort of where to go next. And we've already started talking about some of the items there, but we'll dive a little bit more into that. We talk about adoption. Most technology projects fail not because um, of the code or of the software or the hardware. They fail because people never use it, or they never use it to its full potential. So we will talk about some tips and some approaches that you can take to help drive adoption of new technology in your firm. We know a lot of firms don't have a dedicated technology staff, and so we'll talk about sort of how to manage that in a firm without a full-time technology team or even technology professional. I don't go more than a couple of hours a day without talking about talent in the accounting profession. And so we absolutely had to talk about how technology can improve efficiency and how firms can turn to technology in dealing with talent shortages. And then finally, we mentioned this is an important one for a lot of firms, in particular for smaller and mid-sized firms, how to make sure that you get the biggest return on investment and that you're buying tools that are going to go the distance for your firm. So we'll talk through each of these challenges here and encourage you to contribute your thoughts as we go through this. In where to begin and what comes next, we applied some thinking that is not new to this report, certainly, and is not new to the world of technology. But what we have found is it's often pretty new to accounting firms and public professional service firms, excuse me. And that's to think about applying some agile methodologies to the way that you arrive at this. So agile is it's a couple of things, and it's often defined differently by different people. This is sort of capital A, formal agile, created, let's say, 30 plus years ago by software developers as a way to get their work done in an environment where things were constantly changing, requirements were constantly changing, and it was impossible for them to define a project product and define it perfectly, get all the requirements perfectly nailed, and then go work on it for a year and a half and release it, right? We know that software moves much, much faster than that. So they developed this agile framework. And so you'll see sprinkled through this a couple of agile concepts. And honestly, we do see some firms, really forward-looking firms, starting to deploy agile methodologies, agile project management, into the way they're actually getting engagements done in some cases, certainly into the way that they're using project management software and the way that they're using project boards and moving work down the line as they're serving clients. So we would encourage you to kind of learn a little bit more about Agile, but here's some of the thoughts that are the Agile is germane to, I think, in the where to begin or what to do next. So first of all, Agile relies on a lot of stakeholder engagement. And so the first step here is not to go out necessarily and start Googling tools. It is to start talking to the people in your organization to find out what's happening, right? You've got to sort of define reality, define a current state as a first step in this process. So what are the challenges? What are the pain points? You'll see we get down to a little bit more formal process documentation or evaluation further down the list, but just talk to the team, talk to the stakeholders, and really, if when you implement technology, it would be surprising to me if your expectation isn't that the staff is using it. And if you want the staff to use this, then you've got to understand what the staff's pain points are so that you can really clearly include that in your decision-making process, where you're going to invest, how you're going to invest, and get them bought in right from the very beginning, because technology at its best is going to be solving problems for those folks. So really encourage you to spend the time before you turn to tools to look at what's happening in the business rather than what's happening with technology. Step two here, and this is very much an agile approach, is to talk about defining nirvana. So not the grunge band from the 90s, the ideal end state, right? So we take a step from, first of all, tell us what's happening exactly today in your firm and jump way out into the future, right? If your firm was unencumbered by resources and money and time and some of those sorts of things, ideally, how would it operate, right? What is the ideal end state of an investment in technology, a long-term investment in technology for your firm? In this way, we talk about future proofing and some of those sorts of things, anticipating challenges. But really what this does is it doesn't tell us exactly what's going to happen or in what order it's going to happen, but it does provide sort of a starting with the end in mind mentality that can help you do much more effective tool evaluation. So go from today all the way into the future. And then as we go through the rest of the steps in the process, we'll talk a little bit more about what's happening in your firm today. So again, we're not near tools yet, but we are talking about processes and getting really specific in mapping processes. So encourage you to look at tools like Visio and some of those sorts of things that actually help you to map processes so that you can see how work flows through your organization and where there may be opportunities to simplify, remove complexity, expedite work, find out where the bottlenecks are, find out where people and processes are not working adequately and where tools may in fact be able to help. Because that's the next step. So again, a really thorough process mapping, and honestly, there are consultants out there that can do this work for you, because it's not necessary, like, hopefully you're doing some of this for your clients, right? If you're engaged in advisory services, but it's not always easy to do it in our own business because we know the processes so well. We've done them, we've worked our way through it, we've designed them. So sometimes it is helpful to get somebody else to come in and take a look at sort of being a little bit of a business analyst and seeing what's in the firm and how work is moving around. Finally, it's time to think about going back to those 50 logos in the ecosystem tool and getting into Google and starting to think about what tools are out there to potentially solve your problems, right? You've looked at what are the challenges in the business? Where do I want my ideal end state to be? As we dive deeper into the granularity of processes, where are the bottlenecks? Where are the opportunities for improvement? And you kind of think about condensing all of that into, here are the couple of places that we can make a significant investment that will solve today's problems in process and in business flow, and also get us closer to our ideal end state. Let's go out and start looking at what are the specific software tools that will solve some of those problems. You know, some tips from our experts here relating to, always constantly be looking at technology as a way to influence your tool evaluation. Um, Talking with peers, right? The INCPAs is a great place to get together and talk about technology. I know that the organization has places and channels to actually engage and ask questions of your colleagues from other firms and other organizations about what they're doing, what challenges they're seeing, how they've solved problems. Really encourage you to do that work. It's hugely valuable to hear what's happening, and I have found firms are typically willing to share and talk about that. And then that middle bullet, really important. Some of us see this as sort of table stakes, SaaS, software as a service, or cloud-based solutions. This is a really important one that we heard from our experts, because they are still seeing a lot of firms that are trying to buy locally hosted software, or software that you buy once and then have to maintain yourselves. Often cost is the consideration there. Honestly, a lot of tools have just required you to move to the more SaaS-based approach. That I know Intuit has made those changes recently. Um, Especially if you're dealing with constrained budgets on internal resources and the types of people who can help make software work every day, buying a SaaS solution is certainly, in most cases, going to be your best bet to make sure that you can maintain and grow and update the software, and you don't have to actually have the developers doing that work. Instead, the provider does. Finally, here, in terms of where to begin or what comes next, and when you're deciding where to invest, really encourage you to be practical about timelines, right? Agile methodologies work, I'd say, simultaneously in long-term and very, very short-term increments. And it really is all about being incremental. So you'll hear that come up a couple of times probably through the presentation. Look out far and know exactly where you're going, but then abbreviate that time frame to some reasonable amount, 2 to 6 months is what we say here, where you can get yourself to some sort of a minimum viable product, right? What's the first best step that I can take? Not all of the steps that I can take, but what is the first best step, minimum viable product that I can take to push my firm forward? And then you break that with a workup to get to that 6 or 4 or 2 month window into much smaller incremental steps and do the work in sort of sprints instead. We'll talk a lot about training as we go through here. And then again, now you may be saying, of course, this was put together by people who do this work of consulting with firms. They, of course, would include that as a tip to engage consultants. I don't do that work at CPA Crossings, obviously, but really encourage it. And when we've done work on our own business here, we have engaged experts as whenever possible and realistic to help kind of be realistic in all of these 5 steps, I would say. We've got a question here related to best ways to manage data related to all SaaS solutions. Save admin info, license keys, user info, etc. Yeah, I mean, there are some great, I'm going to try to get you some answers on some tools that you can use to manage access because there are, and maybe if Megan or Kelly want to shoot me a note, like I know that we use some of those tools in our organization to manage access and authentication into these tools. In some cases, you can, if you're doing a bigger implementation, you can work with an organization or actually like a specific tool to look at single sign-on SSO solutions, where a tool like Okta may be able to manage all of your authentication so you can get into all the things that you have in order to manage the business. But we'll work on that, and I'll see if I can get you some tool recommendations here as we go through this. Thanks for that question, Amy. I'm going to move to the next challenge here, unless we have additional questions that you all want to talk through. All right. And I'm so mad at myself for letting the name of that tool that we use slip my head, but our password manager. We will share that for sure. All right, challenge number 2. This is critical to deal with. And honestly, so many of these challenges relate to adoption. As I mentioned, strategies fail, technology fails. Most initiatives within an organization fail, not because of, thank you so much, Megan, LastPass, not because of a lack of need or a lack of investment or a lack of careful attention to selection processes or actual software and code. They fail because people never actually start using them or never get to use them the way that they were intended. That's going to provide an organization with the highest return. So, our experts identified these kind of 3 buckets of things that an organization can do. There's a lot more detail in the report for you to dig through and maybe formulate some questions or some thoughts around. But just here's sort of the highlights: leadership, culture, and agility. And maybe not leadership and culture may not be the things that you expected to find in a presentation about technology. But one way to guarantee your technology does not work for your firm is not to invest the time and energy and intention in building adoption. So, related to leadership, I think 2 important points to hit on here. First of all, whatever time you invest in explaining to your organization why you are implementing new software, why you are changing workflows and processes, why you are changing the tools that they use to get their job done, you almost can't invest too much time there. And you almost can't do it too frequently, right? So we found that you've got to constantly be reminding the team as you socialize the idea of making technology changes, as you start to implement and certainly train, and then as you start to require or encourage adoption, constant reminders of why you're doing this. Because your firm is not going to make a decision to invest in technology and the implementation costs and the temporary, let's say, reduction in efficiency that it takes to put new tools in, unless you have a pretty solid reason why you're doing it. So make sure you are constantly reminding the organization of that. It's just good change management, and it's an important leadership step in building adoption. The other one to hit on here is adopt at the top, right? Really frequently when I speak with not leaders of firms, but folks who are staff in firms, people getting the work done in firms, they just don't have a good example set, right? If the partner is not using the technology but is requiring them to do it, it can be really hard for them to actually buy in. So honestly, in most cases, it means that leaders have to walk the walk. Leaders have to learn the tool. Leaders have to be in the tool. If you want the rest of the organization to adopt it and use it the way that it's intended to. And then when that doesn't happen, what we find is adoption gets really inconsistent, right? The people who, let's say, are bought into the why or are just going to do it because you told them to, start start following, start following orders, start doing what they're told. The folks who are less inclined to do that and see leaders not adopting the technology, um, the friction is most likely to cause between those two groups rather than the up and down the organization. So, really important leadership thing to get right as you look at technology adoption. Some of that carries forward into team culture. Certainly, leadership buy-in is important as you think about building a culture that's going to support change. Um, the investments that you make in software have got to be partnered with investments in training, in communication, in change management, in building feedback loops, all of those sorts of things that will ensure that the software gets used. So again, this is about culture building. It can be an expensive and time-consuming process to train people, to do the communication, to engage in change management, but can't encourage it highly enough. Honestly, when we think about training and communications, we really encourage firms to look at building sort of super users within the organization, people who are more technologically inclined, let's say, people who are looking for a stretch opportunity or a growth opportunity to, continue their career growth. Um, Getting those folks in and super trained and letting them go out and take some of the training burden off of, let's say, outsourced trainers or leaders in the organization. Great stretch opportunity for someone that you're trying to groom into management or leadership, and also can often be a much more practical way for someone to learn is by learning it from someone who's doing the work and doing it alongside of them. So I encourage you to think about doing some train the trainers for internal staff that are super users. Um, and then continuing to solicit feedback as you go through that work. Finally, agility. I've talked a little bit about agility already, but I will just hit on a couple of thoughts here that I haven't mentioned yet. A few of the other principles of agile methodologies are, I did mention being incremental and not trying to sort of boil the ocean when you're thinking about a technology change in the organization. Sometimes you've got to rip out big core underlying platform systems, and it's going to feel like a big disruptive digital transformation, and that's the best way for you to get where you're going. And that happens in organizations, and honestly, often those are really big critical investments in the future and in growth. Where that's not the case, really encourage you to think incrementally and try to build to a technology stack over time instead of slamming in a bunch of tools all at the same time. um, Building cross-functional teams, an agile methodology that is really important. That means you take people from the business and put them into the group that is actually working on technology selection, implementation, and adoption, right? I just mentioned that in terms of communication and training, and it's important to do it all the way through the process to make sure that this tool is actually solving the problems of your business and not solving the problems that some developer that built it thought it could solve. Um, Constant, ruthless prioritization. Your firm cannot do everything all at once. Something else is going to come up that's going to take people off of this project. Make sure that you, as a leader, are investing in the time to constantly prioritize with some regularity, weekly, every other week, looking at how your team is spending their time when they're getting pulled away from a technology project to put out the fire of the day, to deal with the client issue of the day, and how do you help them reprioritize to longer term investments that are likely to pay off if successful. I've already talked a little bit about sort of the need for testing and feedback loops and those sorts of things. So I encourage you to think through those as well. Pause again for questions. I'm going to look at the chat because I saw something pop in. I think that's from my friend, Dr. Nadzen. Any questions or thoughts before we keep rolling through? All right. So challenge 3 was So common, so ubiquitous. There's 40,000 accounting firms in the United States of America. The vast majority of them do not have a dedicated IT professional who's there for the operations of the business, for the technology inside of the firm. So this is a problem that most firms have to solve for. Um, for one thing, if your firm is big enough, we really encourage you to think about investing in this. But most firms we know are not big enough. So we'll talk about outsourced providers and some of those kinds of things. Before we get there, a little bit of reiteration here, but cloud solutions can really reduce the for one thing the technical debt. Technical debt is like old software that takes up time, that is hard to work around, that keeps you from being able to implement new things. Those sorts of challenges that can really gum up the works in an efficient organization. One way to get around technical debt, one way to make sure that you're not investing a ton of individuals in the firm's time, is to be focused on cloud solutions. Most firms still have something on-prem or on paper that they can be thinking about moving to the cloud as a way to accelerate progress. It can be a great, if you look at when you do your process mapping and you find those places where there is still on-prem or on paper process happening, it can be a great, often lower hurdle change to make in the organization to get it moved to a cloud provider. Thinking about document sharing or client signatures or some of those kinds of things. Existing staff, I already mentioned, technology is a great way to think about engaging someone who's ready to make the leap in their career, but needs that sort of development opportunity, that stretch experience. Great opportunity here. Great when we talk every day with firms that are having trouble retaining their staff. And then when we ask that staff, what's the trouble? Often it's just general disengagement from work, or I'm working too hard, or I feel I can get paid someplace else better. And technology is a real way to think about empowering employees, solving some of those problems, creating efficiencies that could ultimately reduce workload for folks. So great way to engage, let's say, a younger or a high potential staff member who may be an excellent auditor, an excellent tax professional, and an excellent accountant. And that might be the exact right person to say, can you take the lead on this project, or can you help me, partner up with me as a leader in the firm to go out and make an investment in technology and think about pushing our firm's technology stack forward. So may sound like an obvious one, but just some tips on who to turn to there, rather than go find the busiest partner who's the person who does all this stuff all the time and hand it off to them. A couple other thoughts here around managing without staff. So third-party providers, a lot of organizations, I'll tell you, most accounting firms are the beneficiary of outsourced accounting, right? It's the fastest growing service line among most accounting firms is outsourced accounting, client accounting services, outsourced CFO, those sorts of things. Because you all are experts in those things, and most organizations are not. So when they turn to you, you can provide them with a more affordable, more effective, more reliable, higher quality offering in their accounting needs. And the same can be true about technology and IT. So thinking about engaging a third-party provider of technology services for your firm often can make some sense and can keep you from just, for one thing, throwing all the work on that one partner who is willing to take it on, or even maybe pulling somebody out who is doing a great job in other work. I'll just mention here on this sort of, do I go with this small local provider who's down Main Street from me, or do I think about a larger managed service provider who may have a more robust offering, but not as much of a personalized or accessible support system? We've got a really robust chart for helping to make that decision in the paper, and encourage you to turn there to kind of look at what matters to your firm. Because again, so many of these decisions are personal and based on individual preferences and individual challenges and opportunities inside the firm. So I encourage you to go out and take a look at that. Obviously, budget matters there, but it's a good thing to look at as I think often you will get what you pay for. Not always, but often when you're thinking about outsourced technology providers, it doesn't always pay to select the least expensive provider. And also be thinking about somebody here who maybe doesn't just provide what you think you need, which may be like help desk services and um, maintenance services, those sorts of things. Try to find a provider who you think can help you look forward. Again, so many of the challenges we see with firms are related to I'm not sure where to go next. Really reflective of I don't have a technology roadmap. I don't have a technology strategy. Think about a provider who can help you look at your business, go through some of these processes we've already discussed here today, and make decisions for the long term, and not just help you, reset passwords and push out patches and those sorts of things. Um, we've got just a little bit of time left. Encourage you if you have questions or if there's something you wanted to circle back on or you really wanted to get to in the next part of the presentation, make sure you're expressing that. Feel free to drop it in the chat or just interrupt me and start talking. That's fine too. All right, talent, the ubiquitous question across the profession. We hear in different places, different geographies, different types of firms, different practice areas. Some of that pressure may be easing up. I will say, as far as state societies go, boy, I have to be careful saying this, but I think it's true. I don't think there's a state society in the country doing better work on workforce development, engaging students in the pipeline, and really trying to solve the talent problem than Indiana CPAs is. So, uh, again, you guys are doing fantastic work, but technology has to be a part of the solution for how you get work done going forward. Um, our experts identified sort of these five fuzzy bubbles of places where inefficiency can get sussed out and solved with technology. And so we'll run through a few of these. As I mentioned, most firms have some of these things lurking in their processes and gumming up the works. So, as you look through the paper, you'll see if one of these is especially relevant to you of, oh my goodness, yeah, we have staff sitting there and keying in uh, information into forms. How can I get away from or around that through things like OCR and other technology? There are tools out there for that. We've got some recommendations for that. Um, reconciliation, obviously, some of the big providers of bookkeeping and accounting software are building in reconciliation. Obviously, QuickBooks Online, which I think is the only offering of QuickBooks these days. It's built in. Encourage you. Here's another place where you've probably already got the service if you're providing accounting and bookkeeping services. Figure out how to do that implementation, how to tie up those systems so that some of that reconciliation can be done by the machine instead of by the mind of an otherwise very valuable resource in your firm. Document management. There are a million tools around here. I would say what we found with some of our experts is that, they've got their favorites, right? John Higgins, a good friend of mine, contributed to this report, a stone cold Microsoft expert. And he can talk you through every which way to use SharePoint and Teams and other tools in the Microsoft suite to your advantage. You are already paying for those if you have an Office 365 subscription. You are already paying for SharePoint, a tool that can really help you with document management, really help you from emailing a bunch of forms around, emailing a bunch of papers around, losing version control, and all that sort of stuff. You probably already have some of those tools, low barrier to entry. It's just about learning how to use them and maximize them, and encourage you to check out places to do that. Again, financial reporting here, Sage, NetSuite, FreshBooks. There's a lot of tools that are really helping to generate great financial reporting right out of the tool, right out of the box. So again, potentially a reason to think about investment in some of these big tools, but obviously you have to evaluate that with inside of your firm and with your clients' needs. Finally, collaboration. You'll notice that in a couple of these fuzzy blue bubbles, I mentioned collaboration and how we pass information around inside the organization. This is often a massive source of slowdown and bottleneck and unbillable hours and disengagement among staff it is not easy to work with each other. And so making an investment here, you see Slack and Teams are highlighted. Again, Teams, you're paying for Teams already. If you have an Office 365 license, it integrates with SharePoint, it integrates with Excel, and so many of the other tools that you're using, Power BI. So encourage you to invest. This is not where a lot of people, when they sit down and think about what CPE am I going to do, or what CPE am I going to encourage my staff to do this year, right? Yeah, stay up to date on tax laws. Yes, you've got to get the latest FASB changes. Yes, you've got to stay technically adept and think about building leadership skills and all those critical ways that you can spend your 80 or so hours every cycle in CPE. Think about carving off some of this collaboration pool optimization as a place you may think about learning. This is a little bit self-serving, I'll say, because through the Indiana CPA Society, CPA Crossings does sell some of these courses for your members. So I say that just to mention, I know that it is available through INCPAs, and that you can get it there. Um, a lot more in the paper around talent shortages and technology. So really encourage you to check that in. We maybe won't spend too much time here, uh, although it is important. I know we're coming toward the end, but this is a really critical consideration. We hear it more from small firms, but big firms have got to be thinking about this as well. Um, Software licensing fees, software investment in buying, selecting, implementing, integrating, all those sorts of things. This can be an expensive proposition. And if you buy the wrong tool, even if you do all the right adoption, you can find yourself having wasted all of that time and money on something that isn't actually going to save your organization any of those two things, time or money. So really encourage you to think about this. I'll say, I mentioned technical debt earlier. I tend to be of the persuasion that if you are being careful and intentional about how to build a technology strategy and roadmap, think about what to do first or what to do next, all the things we just talked about in this session. If you're doing that carefully, your biggest risk is the risk of not acting. Your biggest risk is the risk of holding on to legacy technology that is going to slow you down and keep you from moving forward, and is only going to get harder to rip out as you continue to work forward. So one way to mitigate the risk of bad investments is to think about some of those maybe bigger, older, clunkier systems that you're a little bit afraid of ripping out, because they could also get in the way of you buying the right next tool, right? If you've got a tool at the center of your business that is really hard to integrate with, that is really hard to share data back and forth with, to write APIs with new tools, it's going to be harder for you to select that next new tool that's going to be helpful, which means you likely won't get the right return on investment for the next tool if you've got the wrong tool today. Similarly here, I mentioned often we look at some of the big providers in this space and they say we can do everything for you and there are internal tools. Think about some of these bolt-on skinnier software applications that don't do everything but can help you to improve how your firm uses technology as a way to ensure that the investment is sound. I think everything in this report all adds up to how do you get to better return on investment and better future proofing of tools. Future proofing is important. I will say it's also impossible, right? Technology is going to transform at an increasingly fast rate forever. The future will come at us faster and faster, and the tools that we use will have to change faster and faster. That's why moving to the cloud is so important, because it makes sure that you stay up to date. So return on investment is a great measure for you to be thinking about. Future proof is a much more difficult one. Don't think about I'm buying the right tool forever. I'm buying the future proofed tool. Instead, think about I'm buying a tool in a way that I know that it will be able to change, grow, be disintermediated from my business easily and effectively, right? That is really where we think about making future-proof decisions and investments in technology. So do be thinking about that. We've got some thoughts here. This is a little bit more agile that can help you make those decisions. We're at 50 minutes, which is the requirement for CPE, but I'm going to go a couple more minutes and encourage you to ask any questions. There's a lot in our report about AI. We would be negligent not to talk about AI in a report right now. As I mentioned, I sort of teased this a little bit earlier. I think a couple of high level thoughts. First of all, for most firms, the right approach to AI right now is let AI come to you and learn about AI. So that third bubble, right? Rather than investing in AI tools today, for the most part, firms should be learning how does it work? How will it ultimately impact my business? Making the investment in education before you make the investment in tools. Um, that first bubble there, again, the risk of inaction, the risk of not investing, Roni, risk of not investing in AI can be really serious. We hear from, let's say, mostly from outside talking heads, not in the profession, that AI could replace accountants. We really believe, and this is a little bit of a cliche, and we hear it in a lot of places now, that AI will not replace accountants. AI will replace accountants who don't use AI. And so you've got to be learning today, taking advantage of what's getting built into the tools that you're using. It is showing up in Sage. It is showing up in all the accounting platforms. Um, it's showing up in Salesforce. It's so many of the tools that you may be using to manage your business. Start learning what's there and making and taking advantage of it. One other, I'd say, potential, depending on the size of the firm and workload and all of that, is to think about what we call an AI lab, where instead of buying a bunch of tools, you go out to some of the consumer tools, ChatGPT, Claude, Copilot, Google's Gemini, buy a couple of subscriptions, ask who wants them, and let them experiment inside of the firm. Incentivize whoever comes up with the best idea, the most time saving idea, the best efficiency. Let the team democratically start messing around and figuring out what AI can do for the business, and then incentivize whoever comes up with the best idea and can scale it across the organization. An obvious consideration in all of that is you've got to build some parameters around it. And so thinking about ethical frameworks, compliance, those sorts of things. Obviously, if you are giving staff an AI tool, make sure they know that they can't be putting any client data in it because you no longer own that client data if you dump it into a public or consumer facing AI tool. Um, that data security is paramount to thinking about using AI, and instead they should be asking questions that are more generic in nature, investing in teaching them how to ask questions of GPTs, those sorts of things. Um, you know, there's more in here. There are more considerations and concerns when I talk about getting educated first as a first step. Educate yourselves on the not just all the exciting whiz bang stuff that AI may do in the future, but also the places where AI is currently getting it wrong and hallucinating, the places where there is bias built into AI, so that as you are working with your team to think about how to adopt it or implement it, you're doing that with skepticism. You're doing that with some rigorous consideration for how to work within the regulations and the laws that this profession operates in, but also in ethical frameworks and in secure frameworks. Um, we run the risk of getting into AI whiz bang if we dive too much into that. And frankly, if there's so much talk about what AI may do someday, it's much more important to look at what AI is actually doing today. Just yesterday, I saw somebody talking about and lightly demoing a tool where someone had ingested the PCAOB guide into a consumer AI tool and was using that to answer staff questions about PCAOB regs. I think we see that happening with tax and with audit and with other places, accounting even. So there is so much to come, even simply, even in the sort of garage version of how are we going to build AI tools. If you've got somebody in the team who's really engaged and interested in that, really encourage them with with some parameters, with some guidelines, so that they're making safe decisions for the organization. But as far as big investments of time, again, our encouragement is now for most small and mid-sized firms, let the AI come to you. That brings us to the time. I'm happy to answer any questions. Hopefully you found there was some benefit in all this, some tools that you could take away. However, I have scratched the surface. There is so much more in what is a pretty robust report that was published by the Indiana CPA Society for your behalf, and I encourage you to get in there, check it out. If you have any questions, let us know. Let the society know. You can see Christina just posted how to find it there in the online community in the member section hub. So under practice management. So make sure you do check that out. Obviously, reach out to Christina or the team at Indiana CPA Society, and they can find us if they want more help. And then those five experts I showed at the beginning of the screen, who are all listed in the report as well, they can really help. If you find that you need to make an investment in your firm and you want some help, you can get to them through the society or just contacting them directly. But encourage you, stay in touch with your state society. They are fantastic and can help solve so many problems and answer so many questions or find the answers for you. So you've got a great resource in that. um, Encourage you to take advantage of it. That's the end of the presentation. If anyone has questions, I'm happy to hang around, or you can drop those in the chat. Otherwise, thank you so much for spending 56 minutes with us today. And I don't know if that's a hand raise or a high five. Rebecca, is that a hand raise or a clap? It went away. So it must have been, I don't know what it was. But thank you so much for sticking with us. Appreciate your time. Have a great Friday, a great afternoon, and continue investing in your firm's technology. Thanks.